of revolution is a mixed bag for me. Because on one hand, I like I like it in theory. Because like as long as said revolution is brought about by means of which does not guarantee the deaths of thousands to the point where our original motivations get muddied along the way, then yeah, I am a proponent of revolution. But
Yeah.
you see, humanity is not that simple. We never have been. We've never really been able to actually have a revolution that didn't result in the deaths of many. That's
Yeah.
the problem. That
No,
seems
true.
to be the end result. Like Hitler and the Nazis are an interesting subject because their revolution was not necessarily a violent one by itself. They came out as a result of World War One, and
Yeah.
they were voted into the position that they had. So it's like Hitler and company rose up as a result of people's disillusionment,
Yeah.
and then their violence happened right after the fact. So you have two sides. You have a revolution that started by electoralism, by people choosing their leaders, and then you have the typical violent uprisings.
Yeah.
Like it's I was gonna mention something else because we see this a lot. We see this a lot throughout history and a lot within media. Like but if honestly speaking, the funny thing about Attack on Titan is that if you look at the Jaegers and you look at Marley, you see two sides of the same coin. I mean,
Yeah.
really think about this for a minute here. The Marleyans went around oppressing Eldians and went and just, basically swore to make their lives a living hell, oppress them, all of the above. The Jaegerists, on the other hand, they're pretty much okay with killing literally everyone beyond the wall. They're no different from one another. They're really not. And the
Yeah.
irony is that I think that the Jaegerists, I don't think they're probably aware of that, and they just don't care. That's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, they gone like, oh, they've gone against them, but basically both of them are on the mindset of us or them. It's quite literally that. It's just the difference is the I forgot the name of the basically the the royal family and everything who set them up, with thing. The difference with them, they kind of left them in like well, actually no, they kind of left themselves in prison, but then they basically get in like their own people to go and kill themselves. So they
Exactly.
just
Like
it's
this
like
is
yeah.
this is really this is why the whole Karl Marx and the whole Communist Manifesto, this is why it scares people. It's not as though the writing of Marx by itself produces violence. It doesn't. No theory by itself can really cause inherent violence unless it's explicitly stated to do so, like
Yeah.
the JQ theory, for example. You see, like the JQ is the Jewish question, which a lot of Nazis and alt writers like to spout around. You see, that theory that's dangerous, but the theory of the class mobility, class solidarity, all of that's not inherently violent on its own. It's not. It's really just on how the people who take the theory in choose to adopt the theory, where the Bolsheviks fall short, horribly short, even.
Sorry to interrupt, guys.
Oh no, that's
Hey.
fine. Yeah,
Is
what's up?
is the podcast going on right now?
Oh
I
no,
started,
no, yeah, we're
I kind of, it's not officially started, but I just thought I'd just hit record now. So it's been on for like, I don't know, 4 or so minutes, I suppose. But
yeah, we were just going into the whole subject of Attack on Titan right about
Yeah,
now.
I heard about Attack on Titan, so I was like, oh yeah, nice. And I do agree with what you were saying. It really is like just two sides of the same coin, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially, I think like people hate on Gabby, right? I think on first instinct, I also hated her, but on retrospect, right? Like Gabby is kind of an important character because she's literally like Eren, but from a different perspective.
Literally.
And not
Her
only
whole-
that,
yeah.
but she's also a victim. She is a victim of fascist brainwashing, as
Yeah.
well as just the state of Marley in general.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, that's the noise. Yeah, because I remember everyone was like, "Oh, Gabby, hate Gabby," and I was like, because I kind of I was understanding where, I forgot the name of the writer, but where he was going with Gabby. So I was like, okay, I understand, and so long as she wakes up and sees, smells the roses, then this is great. But if you're just gonna be like, you know, fascism all the way through, then I'll be like, oh my gosh, well, unless I don't know, unless it's being oppositioned by something else of interest to make that more compelling, which I don't know. I just thought, well, so I don't know. So I from the start, I didn't necessarily hate Gabby because I thought, okay, I know where we're going, so it's just a matter of getting there, and that happened. But yeah, I totally understand why people were like, oh, Gabby, man, because yeah, it was kind of rough, man, especially at the beginning.
Like the thing with Gabby is, like you said, it's really easy to hate Gabby's behavior. Like there's really no getting around the fact the little thing that she does in the previous part, which I will not spoil for anyone who hasn't gotten up to season 4 yet. I will not get into that. But the thing is, we need to take a minute to really look at the state of affairs within Marley for just a moment. Marley literally has reduced the Eldian identity to you are either one of the good ones or you are one of the bad ones. That is the state of affairs within Marley. So due to this, Gabby has to fall in line with this ideal, because otherwise she's literally a devil from paradise. That is basically what she will be at that point. You will have no rights, you will have no future. So there is this semblance of pride that she winds up having, because she can basically walk amongst the Marlingans. But what Gabby doesn't seem to realize is that she's never really going to be accepted as a Marleyan. She's always going to be an Eldian because she's always going to be marked as such. And I mean, the funny thing is that I'm speaking for myself here, but as a minority myself, that really resonated a lot harder with me than I would like it to, honestly. Because I would never do the things Gabby has done in more ways than one. But this idea of being a model minority, I feel it's something that Attack on Titan is very much aware of. That's why a lot of these bad faith takes about how Attack on Titan supports fascism or its gross parallels to the Holocaust are tone deaf. I'm like, I don't know. I feel the show is fully aware of what it's commentating on, and it's not making anything paper thin either.
Yeah, 100% right. I never actually no. I guess I did notice, like, obviously that is like taking parallels of like minorities and being discrimination, and after like trying to be like I guess trying to blend in with the people who are like telling you, oh, the things like this and things like that. But yeah, I don't know. I never actually thought about it like too much on like how I am myself. But I don't know, maybe I guess it's just because I don't know. I think maybe fortunately I've never been too like I don't know. I think maybe personally I've never been had too much stuff which stood out in my life where I thought, oh yeah, this guy's been totally discriminating me for this. Even that one, never really. It just goes over my head most of the time because I'm like, okay, well, whatever, you're being weird. Well, that's interesting though.
Yeah, it just hit me on a personal level because I've been replaced to Gabby. I really have. So it's really what kept me from hating the character as much as I wanted to. Granted, that will not stop me from making fun of the character where I see fit. There are plenty of opportunities where I will take a chance to take a stab at Gabby, and it's always worth it. I love making fun of her as much as I love praising how she's written.
Oh yeah, totally.
You know, I think the most I enjoy, like, what is it? Obviously, I was also kind of like in the first moment I read about her and everything. Then I also kind of disliked the character, but now I kind of like the character. But sometimes I purposely, like, you know how when the anime came out and then like people start watching season 4, so then people also like start to hate on Gabby and that, and I always enjoyed like teasing people by just saying like Gabby is the best character, goated character, great, better than Eren, everything like that, just to trigger people.
Top 10 characters of all time.
Top 10 characters of all time, yeah.
The funny thing about that is that I can actually kind of agree as far as being one of the most well-developed characters in any medium period. She is wonderfully written, and the most recent episode just kind of brings it all home for me. Like, well, not the most recent episode, the one that I just finished. I just finished episode 2 of part 2, and
Okay. Yeah.
she has finally come around to understanding where this ideology and where this mindset eventually leads to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
I
she
think.
finally gets it. And when I got to that particular scene, I was like, Isayama is extremely competent as a writer. Not, in fact, I don't think. I think extremely competent is selling him short. I think that's selling him short at this point. Now, I don't know how people are going to react to the ending. I already know how I feel about the ending since I've read the manga. So,
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah. Same.
I mean, I'm just gonna let my feelings be known. I actually like the ending for what it's worth. I'm probably a hack for that, but I feel the ending. I don't think Attack on Titan could have gone out any other way than how it did. I really don't.
Yeah, I thought it was alright. I wouldn't say it was like, oh my gosh, best ending ever. But like,
No,
it
definitely
did,
not.
it did its job. It did what it needed to do, and I was like, okay, I get it. The extra bit afterwards, I'm like, that feels too sequel baity. Which is like,
true.
even if realistically he always had in mind that this is cycle will continue, because it makes perfect sense. That's how society is. All this stuff happens. Civilizations rise and fall. It's just how cycles are. So it makes perfect sense. So I totally get it as a conceptual thing, but to have it there afterwards, I was like, I don't know, man.
I just, yeah.
Like,
I think the reason he had that.
I like to feel that the editors kind of sat him down and like, okay, you've made this thing great, but when we're making a sequel, because this is really, we made a lot of money from this, and they just kind of convinced him to make them a few chapters. I like to think, probably not, I could be wrong, but I like to think that's the reason why it happened, but I don't know.
I really do hope that this is really the end for it. Like, but it's like we said, the cycle will continue, because what Eren winds up doing in the end, and where Eren is going now, it only makes sense that the conflict is only going to escalate in some other shape or form. You might succeed in your initial goal. Again, I'm trying really hard to dodge spoilers here. I'm trying not to say anything explicit, but you can dodge the calamity. You can dodge the first calamity, but then you have another problem. You kind of have a domino effect for everything else. Yeah. You might rid the world of one threat, but you're going to get another problem. So I'm happy that the story at the very end was cognizant enough to really point that out.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. Like, there's one thing about the ending, even the extra bit, is it's aware of that. It's not like, oh, this happens and everyone lives happily ever after. No, it's not necessarily true.
Yeah, because we can't do the whole Aragorn was a good king ending for AOT. It's just not gonna work. Yeah, it's just not gonna work. Like for Lord of the Rings, I mean, even if you were a Lord of the Rings fan, which confession, I still haven't read any of the books, but I am fully aware of this quote that's going around. You can't really end a story with Aragorn as a good king. Because you still have a bunch of questions to ask. What's the tax policy? Yeah. What's the economic situation like? I mean, is there unrest? Are there social upheavals? Like, there's so many questions that you still have to ask. But of course, Tolkien doesn't need to concern himself with that, since that's not relevant to where Lord of the Rings was headed. Yeah. But for any other story, i.e., what Attack on Titan is supposed to be, that can't work. We can't just say the conflict is over because all of a sudden, boom, we dodge one calamity. That's not how any of that's gonna work.
No, exactly. Yeah.
I think it's very sequel baity at the end there. I think it's more like what Kite said, where it's just the author just wanted to tie it back around to the very origin of where the Titans came from. Like the tree thing. When the tree was first revealed. I'm just gonna say ominously just the tree. When it was revealed, we didn't know the origin of it or like where it comes from, and then like at the end it just shows like how a tree like that is made or something.
No, wasn't it the same tree? I mean, it's the same tree, so it's not really that how it's made. It's just kind of showing that this is always kind of been like not central of this world, but I guess in this narrative it's always kind of been present, and it's, if anything, did it get growing bigger, right?
Yeah.
Or am I forgetting? So I don't know. I don't really necessarily showing the beginning of it, because we never really know that. And I think that's probably for the better. It might be one of the things where it's just better not knowing than things, because that's not really the point. But
It's like, I feel one of the inherent problems that we have within sequels, or if anything, is this notion to need to explain how everything started or where everything came from.
yeah.
So full disclosure, I do actually kind of like the prequel Star Wars movie. Again, I know I am shooting my credibility in the foot here, but please
No,
hear me
I
out.
No,
agree.
I like him too.
I
I grew
agree.
up with them as well, so like
Yeah.
it's if anything, it was funny because it's random times there wasn't really much internet, and I never really cared for the internet, so I just watched them and I liked them. And yeah, sure,
Yeah.
there was ones which weren't as hot as others. Even I could tell that when I was young and not really,
Attack of the
writing.
Clones sucks.
Yeah, that was a bit of a dud. It wasn't the best one, definitely.
It really wasn't.
Yeah,
I watched The
But-
Phantom Menace like so many times.
that
That was like
same.
back when I didn't know what everyone thought of it in the internet. I just
Yeah.
this was my own personal enjoyment that I always enjoyed like rewatching it again and again.
Yeah,
It's like, the thing is, I feel the problem that we, not necessarily us as writers have. Well, then again, well, no, actually, we as writers do have this problem because I'm about to take a fat dump on the Legend of Korra in just a minute. So, like, we have this weird notion to feel that we need to explain every corner of how our lore works, and I'm of the fundamental opinion that you don't have to do that, because the thing is, what makes lore as attractive as it is that we don't have all the answers. There always has to be some degree of an unreliable narrator in there somewhere.
Yeah.
There has to be some notion of of this mysticism where we don't have a definitive answer for everything. We
Yeah.
may have an idea of where something came from, but we don't really know how it actually works in full. Like how in Avatar we have the moon was the first waterbender, the mole was the first earthbender. Like you have all of that, and that's really interesting. We don't exactly. I mean, we can have a notion of how the moon was the first waterbender. We can have a notion of how the badger moles were the first earthbenders because we see how they interact with the earth on a regular basis. So imagine how angry I was when Korra decided to have to go back, tell us about the first Avatar, and then completely demystified the lore by telling us, "Oh, it was a lion turtle." I was like, begging your pardon, excuse me, what?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like
I will never forgive them for that. I will never forgive them. And what makes it worse is that these were the original writers behind Avatar, save one. One of them wasn't around for this one. But still, it's still frustrating to deal with.
yeah. Actually, wasn't the one who wasn't around? Wasn't he one who was like really good with the world building or something? If I remember correctly, because he went off to do Dragon Prince. Was it? Or am I getting it mixed?
Yeah. Oh yeah, he did.
Yeah. He went to Dragon
And,
Prince.
I have to admit, the Dragon Prince, at least the last season that's out right now, I really enjoyed it. I genuinely enjoyed it. There were one or two sequences that I either feel were a little drawn out or they didn't last long enough, but I can definitely tell that that's kind of what Korra was missing. Like what I from that show, it was like, this is what Korra was missing. This is what Korra was missing as a series. It was missing this semblance of you keep your lore consistent enough, but you still have a lot of questions that you want answered. You're not going to get all the questions answered, but you get just enough answered that you still find it compelling.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the character writing was really good and consistent throughout. I really appreciated the main antagonist. Like what was his name again? Viren?
Yeah, I think it was Viren.
Oh yes, him. He was fun. Like he never 100% came across as this irredeemable, pretentious idealist a la Amon or Zahir. He just came across as a guy who suffered a huge degree of trauma, and he just feels as though this is the best path for the world to take. It's still gross. It's still a lie. It's a world based on a lie, and that will never be a good thing. A world based on a lie is never a good thing. But he just never really comes across as flat out malicious to me.
Yeah. I still actually need to finish the latest season. I think I was 1 or 2 episodes in, so I need to get on that. But
I think sorry. I think Viren as a villain was like, it was like he was a very normal dude who was just corrupted very easily, or just corrupted by this obsession of like I don't know, of power, but also just protection and stuff like that. Yeah, like how you described it. He was just he didn't want to be disillusioned by what he was striving for, I guess. I also like what is it, his daughter. She's like I really I forgot her name, but yeah, the daughter character,
the wizard one, right? Am I?
Yeah, like
okay.
his daughter, who like she has like now a gray hair, a bit of that as well.
I think I yeah.
I forgot her name actually, but I do like her character. She's like very fun. Also, I'm looking forward to her potential in like the next season. But one thing I want to point out, but this is just offhand, sorry. This one thing I want to point out. I really hope that in the next season they show more of the main character, or like the older brother, the main character, him using more magic. I really want to see him use more magic. It would be so cool.
Yeah, because again, we had gotten so used to basically the idea of only the elves and various races being able to use magic. So a human being able to use magic was not only explained in a way in which it made sense, but it's just really satisfying seeing him go ham in the last couple episodes.
Yeah.
It's really satisfying. Like that kind of evolution with the lore is something that I greatly appreciate. Like there's keeping your lore consistent, that's one thing, but then there's when lore has to evolve with the story, and it has to be done in a manner which doesn't really raise your eyebrow. Because, like, if he could just use magic all of a sudden and there was no clear explanation for that, I'd probably tilt my head a bit. And then it falls into, you have to make sure that the explanation makes sense, makes enough sense to the point where you don't lose the people who jumped in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also think, what is it? Like you said the best. I think like the lore is what helped like make it unique. How do I say this? Like I think the fact that he didn't use much complex magic, or that magic in it of itself wasn't like fully invested into it, or like it was rarely used. At least the main character rarely used like various types of magic. It made the magical scenes much more unique in a way. If you know what I mean, like they held
like
back
more impactful
on...
because he's not like spamming it every 5 seconds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have to use it in a way in which it can benefit you in the moment. You have to use it in a way that's clever.
Yeah. Yeah, literally. Because
yeah, it's like the first time. Oh, sorry.
No, I don't.
It's the first time
think,
where like it's the first time where magic is actually kind of fun to watch again. You know what I mean? Usually you're so numb to seeing, in fantasies like just a bunch of magic and they use the simple stuff. But here it's like it's given a lot of technical depth and a lot of like simplicity that makes it so that I don't know. It's just interesting watching the main character just do a simple like wind attack or lightning attack. Yeah, but that's it. Sorry, I'm going on a rant. I was interrupting.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I think it just it's a good point, and also I think it just makes me think about like how when you using things moderately instead of just using it like like it's like you got infinite credit on it. Like if you use it moderately, or you make the law around it, or something, or the character development, or the moment that you use it impactful and it's rare, but it comes up in a really impactful way, it helps even make something that's quite cliche come off as interesting. Basically, I think that's one of the main things I guess you're trying to say, which they do really good there, where obviously I think with that character, he's not really meant to do, according to the law, far as they know, he's not really meant to be able to do magic, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But then he's kind of able to through him, I think, understand. That's what it is as well. I think that's another format. Avatar does it really good as well, where they kind of make the character, they literally make the character development go in tandem with them learning the power of the magic. You notice that? Like that's I think the reason why it kind of stands out, because it comes through part of their character growth. They don't really understand or fully get to use the thing until they change themselves. and it's only when they change themselves that boom they can make use of it. So then it's not just that they really can use it because they can't use it at the time because they're struggling to use it, or they're just being generally unable to use it. Is when they to a character development or a character moment. So I think there's that as well that kind of makes it stand out.
Right.
Avatar as well.
This is very much why the various forms of bending are very, because they're also a reflection of how the elements work in some poetic terms, of course. Like, like water is free flowing, so when you see the is aggressive, you see how strict and stringent those movements are. Almost there's this semblance of the element reflects naturally off the person who's actually performing the bending in the first instance. So it's not even just a fancy power. Like Sokka said it best, honestly. I can't say it any better than he did at the beginning of the show. Like, whenever you want to talk about how bending works in Avatar, you don't really need to explain it. You can just grab what Sokka said and call it a day. He's the best ambassador for the show by far, in more ways than one, mind you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I think I had something else to go with that. I thought it was something else. There's something else to say to that. But yeah, like literally, like like how each of them have their kind of like their own character and their own sort of like lore and thing behind it. It just helps. It connects to the world, and then it connects to the person, and then it's like you can kind of understand the person through the power they use to a degree as well. I think that's what, like, well, there's a lot of things. There's so many things you can learn pretty much almost everything from Avatar, I've noticed. But if there's one thing you want to take from, like, maybe like mix and like use how to make your magic work really well in your world, I think that's one thing. Try to make it connected to like the character, like be able to express the characters in some way or another. Don't just be, oh yeah, fire and this and this and this, whatever. That could work, but if you can make it connect to the characters and then connect to the world as well, yeah, I think that's like a really good way of doing it.
You'd be surprised how delving into that philosophy can really embolden your writing on top of that. Like, it's one thing to have a character just use their magic power and call it a day, but it's another thing when that ability is literally intrinsic to their identity. Like, I know my lead character, who you can see in my display pic, I don't know how well it shows on the videos. In fact, I've never even watched one of her podcast videos, to be honest. But her method, she's not a very violent person. She's a bit of a pacifist, as we know. She will fight when she has to, absolutely. But you'll notice that even when she's fighting, most of her techniques are not necessarily gained to killing. They're more geared to defending. It's more of a shielding method, more like you're warding off violence rather than intending to do violence yourself. It can hurt if she whips out her power straight at you, it's going to hurt, absolutely. But it's the fact that she doesn't do that makes fight scenes of her interesting. Because she's not out to hurt you. She's out to keep herself safe and keep others around her from getting hurt. If anything, I feel one of the best things that I can point to with her is there is a sequence where there is a large amount of guards rushing at them with guns and everything. She manages to break away from the main attack squad. She hides on one end, and her partners on the other end. They basically use their combined power to seal the oncoming unit into a temporary veil, so they can get further away while they lead the attack team to basically chop the living crap out of those fools when they get out of the veil. So it's less that she's an attacker, more of a defender. Again, which again, the girl is a pacifist. She doesn't like killing people, so she's mostly spec'd into defense at this point.
No, that makes sense. That makes total sense. Yeah, yeah. Even with my story, I've taken there's Avatar, but from one thing, because I've taken from quite a few places, but I think one thing that really helped make my power really work, because I have it's basically one of my main powers in the world is like it's like an element system. So you have people who can use different elements, but it's kind of mixed in with, like, Hunter x Hunter and how they can use Nen to like shield themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So most people typically are able to like they typically learn to do that first.
Right.
But they typically learn to do that, but like each of them have different elements with their energy. So in a way, you know, like kind of Pokemon, different elements kind of clash differently. You know, this one's stronger to stronger like fire, strong against the water, strong against fire,
Right. The
and stuff like
opposing
that. You know,
elements.
yeah. So there's that kind of like rock paper scissors amongst like the elements I have, but then also like you can through like through many Hunter where I kind of really thought about this was like, you know, where each type of Nen, there is typically a personality that's kind of associated with them. I think Hisoka says it the most clearly at one point when he's fighting Gon in Heaven's Arena. He says like, "Oh yeah, like I can," he's like, "I can kind of tell what kind of ability you have just by your character and your temperament, typically."
Right.
Like, oh, that's interesting. So I kind of attributed a bit of that into the element system, and then after a while, I think it was a mix of that, and then there's I've forgotten the beginning of it, but there's something hierarchy of needs. You know what it means?
Right.
You know, there's like, you know, the most important things like air, and you know, there's like there's things we need. Our most important needs need to be required before we can do like other things in it. So with the mix of those things, I kind of have like a lore behind. So I don't just have the elements. I have the lore behind the elements and what one came first and what one came last, and yeah, it just comes full circle. So you have like the characters, and then you have like the lore behind which one came first, which came last. Why these are more common this in this era than this era, because this cycle of the world and whatever.
That's why I like the way how you put it. That's kind of why this lecture I went to the other day about the elements of writing at Otaku Fest the other day, or was it what was it called again? Oh shoot, give me a second. I need to remember what this is called before it drives me nuts. Yes, it was Otaku Fest. There was a writing panel there, and it was mostly was circled around the idea of the elements of storytelling, the basic elements of fire, water, earth, and all of the above. Like whenever anyone hears like basic and everything, they kind of just seem to assume the worst. It's like, oh great, they're not really going to do much of anything with this concept. But the funny thing is that those little things that we kind of shy away from, or that we're so scared of being labeled as basic or unimaginative, those building blocks are literally what make up the foundation of your story. Like the basic elements of fire and water can have a greater effect on your writing than you realize. You don't necessarily have to do it as an explicitly magical story. You can be doing it like a regular everyday story, and you can still find some way to relate the element of fire to a character. Like this character's personality is aggressive, direct. They make things happen instead of waiting. Or that you have this person flows like water. They're calm, patient. They prefer to things on a balanced manner that makes them comparable to flowing water. That sort of deal. Like those elements are a lot more vital than you think. Like even if it's just something of a euphemism, like I'm using it right now, it's still something that you can form a base around. Like I literally at this point have decided to think more about how the magic system within my work works, not necessarily based off the fact that it exists in this world, but in the sense that how does it interact with the characters? Because like I said, the planet in my world is it's living and breathing, so its bounties interact with the characters on a regular basis. So this means depending on who that character is, this is going to depend on how they're able to wield that planet's bounties. If you're someone like my main character who's very, very, pacifistic and doesn't like to hurt people, she's going to get something that works like a veil. But if you get someone who's very angry, very hateful, very resentful, then you wouldn't be surprised if they use their ability on you and you find out your skin is burning. That is contempt. That's hatred. And
manifest into a power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I don't really think anyone should be afraid of putting in the basic elements of anything within their stories, even if it's something as literal as fire, earth, and water. In a sense, all you really need to do is find a way in which that euphemism or that symbolism can work for you. It doesn't necessarily have to be overt. It can just work in a way that makes sense for your story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I can go through. Yeah, because even I think there's even books that they go through personality types through elements. I think it was just like it's just another way of helping to express certain emotions or feelings. It can be easily used as a tool for that because, like, we are essentially creatures of who feel things, and that's how we understand through things. Obviously, we use knowledge and intellect and everything, but then it comes down to sometimes a lot of things come down to a feeling or what we get, a sense we get from it. So you really think about it, like reason why water gets put on the side of calm and all can be flexible and that stuff. It's because we've looked at water and we're like, that's kind of this has these kind of attributes, and we can kind of relate that to people in ways to help us maybe define or understand something that we knew was already there, but we couldn't find a proper language for. And it's just another way of another way of getting your point across.
Yeah,
when you get down to it, like when it comes to that narrative speaking. But yeah, it's don't be afraid to use some things. Yeah, it's true, because I think a lot of people they'll hear like the basic elements and like, oh, here we go, we've seen this a billion times, but like, well, I like to think a lot of things have been done a billion times, but it's just how you go about it and why you go about it. If you just put fire in for fire, then yeah, maybe you might be running down that path which a lot of people could be worried about. But if you're really thinking about like, okay, well, I put this here, what does this do, and how would it interact with other things, and what is this is being attributed to, and you start really thinking about like how interactive the characters, the world, and what will do for the narrative, then that's when you have something, and that can contribute to anything, and it's even no matter how basic it is. And then it's just like I don't know, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on. You go for it.
Yeah, sorry. So I actually, I think when I wrote my story, I also like wanted to incorporate a bit of like the powers are integrated into the character's personality and stuff. But also, I did use some of the bases of like the whole fire, water, earth thing, but I would try and reinterpret them in my own story. I don't know. Maybe that's. I think like in retrospect, maybe I was doing it I was trying to be original for original's sake, but I think some of the stuff that I did in my story with the whole recontextualizing kind of still works. For example, in my original story, I had two characters. One of them had ice powers, another one had fire powers, right? I think in a typical story, the person who has ice powers, they're often they're more intelligent, more relaxed, and yeah,
they're chill.
They're just chill. Yeah, no pun intended. And then the character with fire abilities are usually like very energetic. A tsundere, I don't know, yeah, but just energetic, aggressive, and emotional and passionate, I guess. But the way I recontextualized both of these characters with their respective abilities, to where you can look at both of these, the fire and ice. It still represents passion, but it can also represent another aspect. So in the case of fire, while it's like passion and energetic, I also imagine it as just pure power and kind of you could say maybe
Destruction.
Not destruction, but rather kind of like courage or inspiration, kind of. The way so this character, she is not energetic. She's rather calm, but she is a leader who inspires people. That's the way I imagine. So she's like a fire. She sets a fire in everyone's heart. It's kind of that type.
Yeah.
Set your heart ablaze.
Set your heart ablaze. That type of character. So she's completely calm. She's not energetic. She doesn't go aggressive. She's very intelligent and everything like that. But she's more of a leader. leader, leading people on, kind of that type of thing. And then the
So it's
ice
kind of like she lets off that energy,
Yeah.
like that in terms of energy and character. It's kind of like she likes to fire on other people.
Yeah.
Or you don't see it on her. But okay, yeah, I
Yeah.
get that. That's cool.
Yeah, and like it's not. Yeah, exactly. And then the ice character, it's not that. How do you say? He has a very fun side to him. You know, he likes to play around a lot, but he hides a bit of a kind of emotionless. Kind of dark side in him. Basically, like he, what is it? His, I think I coded his like code, not code, but like kind of like a key name that I symbolized him for was that he was always cold-blooded, in the sense that he just doesn't care about people, kind of that sense. In the same way, a cold doesn't care who you are. It will if you stay out in the cold, you'll freeze over, kind of that type of aspect. It's like I tried to reinterpret like these characters in this way, rather than the typical way that you would imagine these characters with the powers that they have.
Yeah, so that it seems like you just kind of use that to, instead of going for the typical first instinct reaction for what these elements represent, you kind of thought a bit deeper into it and kind of thought another way to kind of express those elements in a way that seems it's different, but at the same time makes sense. That's what it sounds like, which is pretty cool. That's just again, yeah, that's neat.
While we're talking about all these crazy magical stuff, we should probably there's this question that I saw here that we got on that thread that still gets me. You know, the one that says, "What makes a good fight in action scene?" I don't think we've answered this question yet.
Ooh, I love this discussion. Actually, yeah, I like writing action.
We kind of maybe answered it in some element, but not. Don't think maybe directly. But we can always talk about it again.
Because I don't remember if we ever really talked about this one. Like, I wanted to talk about it during the last podcast, but Will had to leave. I feel bad talking about it now with him still not here, but I feel if we don't talk about it now, we are probably going to forget about it again.
I mean, we could talk about it now, and then we can bring up the topic again with Will.
Yeah.
Maybe we have some different perspectives on it. Who knows? He can bring it. You know, we could talk about some certain aspects of it. I don't know. We could. Yeah, I'd say we go for it.
Yeah, that sounds fine. So the question was like, what makes a good fight scene?
Yeah, and what makes what makes one bad?
Okay.
May I mention, or may I start? Because
yeah, you go for it.
Oh, sorry. I don't want to flex, but I'm pretty good at writing action scenes. Or maybe I am a little bit of flexing, but I'd say from my knowledge and also from learning a bit online as well, I've learned that when you write an action scene, it should feel like a consistent flow with no breaks in between. Like if you were to have an action scene and then the chapter ends and continues in the next chapter, it would not work that well. The flow would feel off. It's always better to have like an action scene in one go. Or if you are gonna break it apart into like two chapters, it should try to separate the action scene itself into two phases. Right. Maybe like one phase where it's, I don't know, something like the characters are fighting in one environment, and then suddenly it's in the next chapter they transition to a different environment, and there's now different stakes involved suddenly. Small tips. If you're gonna write fast action scenes, you should always have shorter sentences.
Oh, absolutely.
Sentences. And if you're gonna describe a scenario, then you should have long paragraphs. Simple tips. But yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would have said. Like, I've come to notice something when it comes to writing fighting scenes, and I want to put a disclaimer that I am not an expert by any means of the imagination. I feel one of the bigger problems with BookTube and OfferTube as a whole, which I don't really think we can be officially affiliated with, but the big problem with a lot of advice givers is that they will give you, like, grandiose advice or just basic bitch-level advice, and they'll just kind of go about it from there. And then you have one of two situations. One, the advice isn't nuanced enough to do much of anything with, and then two, the person who spouts it doesn't really follow their own advice. So I fell into the latter category, you see. Because like like 2 years ago, I kind of realized what the biggest problem was when it came to writing fight scenes for me. I was doing the blow by blow style, right? And blow by blow basically implies that you were describing every single movement bit by bit. You know, like you're describing the slash, the parries, all of the above. You don't need to do that for a fighting scene. You don't have to. You could do it if you really want to, of course. Because, like, there are people out there who are into that. But for the interest of pace, you might not want to. And the reason for that is it will get repetitive really, really quickly. One of the best examples that I've seen for fighting scenes out there really comes from Kanoku Nasu's work in Fate Stay Night and Tsukihime. Not necessarily because I feel they're like, oh my god, they're the best written fight scenes ever. Not necessarily. I feel this really comes down from the fact that while we are getting somewhat of a blow by blow from characters, we're also getting what the character is thinking in the middle of the fight. Like, we're not necessarily getting long, drawn-out monologues, because again, we are in a fight scene. We do need to ensure that there is a fight going on. However, while the character is struggling to stay alive, trying to think of what they can do to counter their enemy's tactics, they're also thinking about how scary the situation is. Like, the tension of a fight scene also comes from the fact that this character could get hurt, like, really, really badly. They could probably die. That's always going to be a looming aspect, but what I do enjoy is being able to know what the character is thinking and feeling. And depending on what the character is like, that should really affect the narrative voice for that scene. Like, is this a character who's confident and who loves to fight? If so, then I feel that should be reflected in the writing. If they love to fight, then they can probably mention the adrenaline that's filling them, like this endless pleasure of meeting my enemy head on. Or is this person a pacifist and absolutely despises fighting? Like, they won't necessarily lament on how much they don't want to fight. It's going to be, how am I going to get myself out of this situation alive without compromising on my ideals? How am I going to do that? Like, you can make a fight scene go beyond just the regular blow by blow. You can still do that and it can still work, for sure, if you write it well enough. But I feel what can hurt a fight scene overall really just comes down to your pacing and how many words you wind up using for everything. Because if you're, again, this is why I don't really like using blow by blow myself, because the last time I ended up doing that, let's just say I was stuck on my chapter for at least 2 hours, not even writing it, reading it, and the same thing happened to everybody else who picked it up too. It boiled down to, this fight scene is cool in theory, but when I try to read it, it's really, really slow. And it shouldn't be slow-paced, like, at all, not for this context. A slow-paced fight can still work, but for the scene that I was writing, which was kind of like a high-speed chase race sort of deal, it being slow-paced was the last thing it needed to be. So a lot of this really depends on the context of which you're writing. So, like, if you need to do a fast fight scene, like something that's fast-paced, you can't rely too much blow. But if you want a slow and methodical instance, where this is going to turn into outsmarting your opponent, kind of like on a slower scale, because this person literally knows you from the inside out, then a slow and methodical scene can make sense.
No, yeah, that makes total sense. I think for me, it's because we understand, especially when you're talking about writing the fight scene, there is this. You got to keep in mind. I think basically what you're saying there at the end, where like you said you're going blow by blow, and obviously if that was maybe done in film, it'll probably look awesome.
Right.
But when you're writing it, that's where the disconnect is.
Exactly. The difference in the medium. Yeah. This is where it comes into play.
Yeah, there's that. I think that's one big thing. Usually, I think a lot of people, even Wattpad, I think a lot of people just took that in mind. That will improve their thing straight up. From what I can see.
Could you elaborate a little bit on the blow-by-blow thing? I feel like I have a grasp of it, but I don't fully understand it.
So the blow...
Oh, elaborate. Okay, so do you want to... I can do it.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, blow-by-blow is just basically... So say you're watching a movie and there's like a guy and he did like... Bruce Lee did like a bunch of kicks and punches and parries and blocks. He did like probably like in a minute he did like, I don't know, 15 punches and 45 kicks. And in writing, you've written basically all that down. It will look great in film in that minute, but it'll take what, I don't know, in that time to write it. The time you read all that, it'll be like what, half an hour at best.
Oh,
and
okay.
it's just the flow of that will feel wrong, because what you see in your head, if you try to write that directly into page, it doesn't translate well. In fact, Brandon Sanderson, he talks about this really well in one of his lectures.
He does.
He basically talks about this directly. So that's really good bit of thing to go through. But just to keep in mind, it's always good to keep in mind, because obviously when you imagine something in your head and then you write it down. But so there's that, and then also I think in my head I'll just try and boil it down to two things quick as possible. But in my head, when I usually go for a fight scene, I think about puzzles and like a conversation. Because I always like to think a good fight is a bit like a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
It's like you're against an opponent, and they'll send this and this at you, and you're like you're responding to this. How you responding to this? Are you responding to it fair? If you respond to it fair, you're gonna be timid. You're gonna be blocking not as good as you probably could if you was less scared. There's all these that's like the emotional, I guess that's like the emotional glue of like the battle, and that's that, keep in mind. And then puzzles is, well, there's a scenario, like I like to not just be, especially because it's writing as well, again because we're doing the writing medium, you got to find other ways to make it interesting. And again, Brandon Sanderson, he does a really good job of kind of touching upon this, but I'm not sure you're using the exact words of how I'm going to explain it now, but it's not too far from what he's saying. Like he would usually say, like he'll put like either like a countdown, or there'll be a goal to go somewhere. There'll basically be something for them to try to do, and that'll be how you're measuring how the battle's going, whether you're succeeding, are you getting closer to that goal, or you're failing where you're going further from that goal. But like what I like to say when I say puzzles is, how JoJo's really good at like making the fights be like dynamic, because he's using so much, there's a problem and you're like, oh, how am I gonna deal with this problem? After you kind of have to really think about the tools the character has, or what they're able to do, and the environment they're in. So I like to think, so when I say puzzles, I like to think about it like that, because it helps me think about, okay, well, this enemy has this, and okay, what time they because some powers, they kind of work better in certain environments and certain places, and and in open spaces. Like for example, if I use Natalie for example, she uses lightning as like her main like offensive attacks, and when she's outside, because her emotion can summon storms, and when she's outside, she's kind of disgusting as a fighter. She can she can wipe quite a few people down quite if they're not expecting it, especially because her powers are kind of unorthodox as well, so it catches the people off guard. But if she's indoors, she can't use the lightning from the sky, so that kind of nerfs her. So then she will have to use other methods to deal with, say, opponents she probably could have dealt with easier outside. So then it comes a matter of a puzzle, like, okay, well, I'm in this situation, and this is happening, and I have these abilities, and they have this abilities, and I'm here. What can I do to kind of get out of this situation in a certain way? And I think that just helps keep things dynamic, helps me think about other avenues to deal with the problem, except for hitting it really hard, or so yeah, I think that's the best way to explain it. I think of the fight as a conversation that keeps me in the emotional part, and then the technical part, I like to think of it like a puzzle, and between them two, kind of.
Yeah, it's kind of like you said, as like a conversation. When someone says something, you will naturally respond to that. So, someone does a certain thing on the battlefield, you need to think of a response, and you better hope to God that response is the right one, because one mistake will get you killed. Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah. It's basically okay. So this person gave me a square answer, so I need to think of a square pegged hole so I don't get killed. But eventually, but maybe you could throw a circle hole in there somewhere, maybe just to throw them off. But I sure do hope you have a means to actually counteract what just happened and make sure that your character doesn't get killed off. But chances are, this is
Yeah.
the main character. You're probably not going to kill them off that easily anyway. But at least
Yes.
give us a semblance that they're overcoming this normally, and not because you, the writer themselves, yourself, want this character to survive. We gotta have some
Yeah.
means of knowing how they got out of that situation without getting their ass handed to them or
Yeah,
killed.
true. Also, Hunter x Hunter does that so good, and it's because again, it's the goals. It's like a lot of you think about it. A lot of typical fights is, oh, I'm fighting this guy, and if I lose, I die. If I win, I survive. Well, then you've basically turned the goal and the puzzle of how to deal with it. The puzzle can be complex to get to that or survive that, but you're basically turning the goal to simply, oh, if this character loses, he dies. Well, then if he's the main character, you're not going to be as worried, especially at the beginning of a show. You're like, well, he's the main character, he's gonna win. So what Hunter x Hunter does is a lot of the goals that Gon has is not necessarily that if he loses he'll die. Is something, if he loses, by losing is he failed to do something. It's not necessarily death. It's not simply death. And that's the reason why if we look into Hunter x Hunter, I think over half of the battles Gon goes through, he actually doesn't win. Because he's allowed to not win. Because the situation is not, oh, if you lose, you die. So I think that's another thing, if you want to kind of make things more interesting, is shift battles away. Don't necessarily make all battles be, oh, need to make sure I don't die, if possible. Some obviously, like in that show, a lot of them, because he's going through trials and stuff, and then it depends on the show as well. But yeah, if you can find ways to make sure the goal's not simply that, then I would say take it. I try to keep that in mind too. I can't say if I succeeded or not. I'm actually thinking back on it, but yeah, I think that's a good one.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And what is it? I think like when you explain blow for blow thing, then I like finally understood. Because I think another like good thing, another good tip, and when I'm saying these tips, it's more like for whoever who's watching it, because I'm pretty sure you guys already know. But another good tip is to always have a bit of vagueness in what you're writing. You gotta keep it vague, because the thing is, you gotta have full trust in the reader that they're imaginative enough to fully imagine the scene. So sometimes having vagueness allows the reader to fill in their head what's happening. So you could just obviously you don't have to be don't be too vague. Don't be like he punched and that's it. That's a little bit boring. But try to describe to a point
like,
where it's like,
where's the punch going? Like, where's it going? Where does it hit?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
how does he feel? How does the opponent feel when he receives that punch? All that, but still keep it a little vague, not too over described, like his knuckles broke or something. Or wait, actually, that's still under. But like something too over descriptive.
He threw his sword down 45 degrees diagonally at 45 miles per hour. Oh my god!
That's the worst. Like, I feel like there is a place for that, though, in a sense. Like, the funny thing about that is, depending on the participants or maybe even the observers involved, then you could probably get away with a description like that somewhere. Like,
true. Yeah. Like, context, I think, like if you had a character who's an expert in certain things, or notice their temperament is to notice certain things like this, or they're a fighting expert. They do a lot back.
Or if you want them creepy, if you want to make your scene creepy, or just how, or you can just to communicate how deep the character is into the situation, that they actually took the time to think about that. They actually took the time to be that methodical to notice to notice the degree, the angle, and the force. If your character is at that point, that should be a bad sign. Not necessarily for the opponent, but probably where the character is in their life at that moment in time.
Yeah, like their mental state, basically.
Yeah, like they're either terrified or they have just run out of craps to give.
Yeah, they're not fighting ready, man.
Yeah, they're not necessarily fighting at that point. They're either so lost in the situation, or this person is so bored that the most interesting thing that they can do is do math in their heads.
Oh, that's so good. Oh Oh, that was funny. Oh my god.
That's a great idea for a character, like even a villain.
Yeah, I can imagine it. I was
That
actually,
would be
I was
great.
actually, I was thinking about the former one first, where like the guy's so terrified. I was like, oh damn, that could be quite deep moment. Yeah, even the other one is just like it's total opposite spectrum, but using the same thing. Yeah, that's true. Okay, I guess we've covered. I guess we're all satisfied with fighting the that topic, yeah.
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 Indeed,
Cool.
I think we're pretty good on that. You know, since you mentioned villains, I think their other question was how do we make a good villain? That was another one.
Ooh, nice.
Oh boy.
Okay.
We were just talking about our boy from Dragon Prince, so this is fun.
Okay. Who wanna go first?
Yeah, someone else can go this time if they want.
Okay. I don't know. I already collect my thoughts on that right now, but obviously not a good villain. You know, the typical answer, which I think is true in general. A good villain should be a foil to the protagonist. They should, in a way, a really good villain should be able to like reflect or bring out the full potential of the protagonist through their actions. Beyond that, I guess it comes down to taste, but I do generally like to think that also a good villain should understand, like you shouldn't agree with them, you should hella disagree with them, like hell no. I think the more hell to the no you disagree with them, but then at the same time you see the madness to their method, the better. Because then it makes you think, oh crap, that could be me. You know what I mean?
Like,
I think that's what makes a really good villain.
A villain could very well be just one bad day away for one bad day for you. The difference between a good villain or a good antagonist is the fact that they had their one really bad day and they could never recover from it.
Yeah, they fell off and never got back up. Basically, yeah, 100%. I don't know what else. Because I guess I can elaborate. Is there any point in elaborating that? I can't really think of elaborating that. But
yeah, I can.
I don't know.
I can hit on that some more.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Because like villains and antagonists are kind of two separate concepts. Like the antagonist is someone who fundamentally stands against the protagonist. They don't necessarily have to be a villain per se, but the villain antagonist is kind of used interchangeably in most situations. So to make a good villain in particular, I feel not every villain out there necessarily needs to be that layered. Like what this question is asking. Cardboard villains are bad. This isn't entirely true. The thing is, not everyone out there really needs a concrete or complex motivation to really do some of the things that they do. Maybe not necessarily in the context of your story. Because Fire Lord Ozai in Avatar is little more than an imperialist. That's really all he is. He just believes in this idea of spreading the wealth and knowledge of the Fire Nation far beyond its borders. He doesn't really have a tragic backstory. We had a picture of him as a baby, and that wasn't gonna stop Aang, because Aang knows he needs to go down. That's not gonna stop him. We know he needs to go down. So the Fire Lord by himself isn't necessarily a villain because he has this layered, complicated backstory of trauma and loss. No, the Fire Lord has inherited the fundamental imperialist state of the Fire Nation as it's been long before he was born. He inherited the situation and he's simply continuing the beat. So in a sense, he's nothing more than a force of nature and an obstacle for Aang to overcome. But now, depending on how you see that, that makes him a very bland villain. I'm here to tell you that it actually doesn't. This actually makes Ozai terrifying. We don't see Ozai as a person. We see him as a monster. He's framed as a monster throughout the entire series. We don't even get to see Ozai's face until long after season 1 is finished. We don't even get to see his face, and when he is on screen, he's doing the same thing that the cutaways kept showing you he was doing. He's breathing fire, he has mastery over the element. This is the head honcho. He runs the show. This is the guy you need to be scared of, and the writing of the show reminds you of his influence. You see the Fire Nation taking over the Earth Kingdom? That's Ozai's work. You see the Fire Nation actually take over the Water Tribe? That's Ozai the background too. What you need to do in order to make sure that your villains, in my opinion, are compelling, whether or not they're, three-dimensional or cardboard, you need to make sure that villain has a presence. Like, their presence is what needs to matter. Like, does your character think about them? Does your character actually look over their shoulders just in case they're nearby? Like, even if your villain is a bit of a clown, someone who just sits in the background and laughs, think about it like this. A methodical person who can actually think about what they're doing, they're kind of scary. But imagine a complete psychopath having the power of a god. Don't you think that's 10 times scarier than someone who can actually think about what they're doing?
Final Fantasy VI?
Exactly. Kefka in Final Fantasy VI is an example of a villain who's very one-dimensional. Now, he does have a backstory similar to Terra's in the sense that he was experimented on, but the thing is, it doesn't matter. Kefka doesn't care. Kefka has never brought up his suffering, because Kefka doesn't see it that way. As far as Kefka is concerned, there's no point to anything. So he just feels as though everything is better off if it gets wiped out. So imagine if someone like that gained the power of a god. What do you think is going to happen to the world shortly afterwards? Well, it's gonna get wiped. It's gonna get wiped out, isn't it? And that's exactly what happens in Final Fantasy VI. So, like, Kefka, and even Xdeath from Final Fantasy V, who his motivation is literally he just wants to return the world to the void. That's it. He doesn't have any other reason behind what he's doing. Now, you could go into the fact that he's literally an amalgamation of several demons who were killed and buried in a mass grave that somehow managed to give self-awareness by crawling into this ancient tree. You can talk about that all you want, but at the end of the day, Xdeath is a simple villain. All he wants to do, return the world to nothing. Kefka, he feels as though there's no beauty or sanctity to life, so he just feels that we're better off destroying it, because there's no point to anything. Like, a villain doesn't need to be the most layered to be a threat or to be compelling. Because all you need to do is, you need to just understand why they do what they do. And even if you don't understand it, how do their actions affect the cast? How do their actions affect the cast? Because, like, did your villain poison an entire lake and kill everyone in the castle as a result? Did your villain stab a flower girl through her back in front of you and you couldn't do anything about it? Did your villain create a void above a shrine that sucked up all of your best friends and your turtle? Like which one? Like, which of the above? Because here's the thing, that's a personal stake for every character involved. That's a personal stake for everyone. So, like, if your villain manages to affect your character in some personal manner, or i.e. affects the world in some personal manner, you're doing your job. Now, that's not to say that you can't have complex villains, because I honestly feel that that's kind of the go-to for a lot of people nowadays. It certainly is for me. But I can't really say that having a layered villain by itself really is a be-all, end-all. Because sometimes some villains just work by just being flat-out, wahahaha, I'm just a terrible person overall, honestly speaking.
I agree, definitely. Because, there's a charm, and there's a really, like, potent thing with both sides of the spectrum. And it's just, I think it just really comes down to the matter of what your story needs, and what do you feel works best to kind of tell that, to help push that story along. So yeah.
And I want to bring up one more thing. So in book 3 of the Expanse in Summer, the main antagonist of the book is Mercury. And the funny thing is, Mercury doesn't really come into his own as a villain until the very last arc of the book. Throughout the story, the conflict is kind of gray. The story started out with the settlers blowing up a ship that belonged to Mercury's energy company, right? And now, because of this, by the time the main characters get there, the situation is already a mess. It's really difficult to maintain any semblance of peace between the factions, because Mercury already pulled the trigger by shooting one of them in the face after one of his ships was destroyed. You see, Mercury did something wrong here, but at the same time, Mercury is kind of justified, because the thing is, he doesn't know when these people are going to act up again. He doesn't know. Because chances are they're going to kill him next when he's sleeping. So you get where he's coming from. So in a sense, he is the villain, yes. But his motivation is clearly lined out in that he's trying to do what he can for his company and what he can for his men. He only really becomes the full-on villain when he flat out tells the audience that people like me, the ones who go out there and tear through the land, this is our right. This is what we do. We're here to lay out the foundation so all of you mediators and peacekeepers can come later. That's the point where Mercury becomes a villain. That's when he becomes a villain. His motivations up till now were somewhat justified, but now that he has fallen into this ideology that peacekeepers, mediators, and everyone else are not necessary because frontiersmen are supposed to go out there, savage the land, tear it to pieces, then you have the more politically minded people coming up after. That's when he becomes a villain, when he falls into that ideology. That's when he becomes a threat.
Yeah.
I have nothing to say. No, but that was a great analogy, honestly, and great examples. Personally, I don't know. It's like I have, honestly, I don't feel like I've succeeded in writing a proper villain, but I have obviously analyzed and looked into other villains. To support your claim about like. Or your examples about like cardboard villains, right? If you think about it, Madara from Naruto is a very simple villain, but he's beloved by everyone. His only logic is that he just wants to have fun. He just wants to have fun and fight people, or like just make chaos.
Yeah,
and everyone, he became like everyone's instant favorite, and everything like that. Chaos.
We're here to kill chaos.
We're here to kill chaos.
Wait,
Chaos
actually,
Skylanders giant from Walmart, even though he knew I wanted it.
wait,
Chaos
have
is a
you?
bitch.
I saw this clip, and I'm actually blinking my eyes, wondering if I really believe if I saw what I saw. Yeah, it showed that the Stranger of the Paradise game. Yeah, and it shows the three guys, and talking to this woman, and they're all like just in their trunks, and then you ain't seen it. I'll probably send a link to you later because it was just so. I'm like, what is this? Is this really a thing? So then she's talking about, I don't know. I wasn't paying too much attention because I was so shocked. Like, what's going on? It's kind of middle of a conversation. I didn't want to get too much spoilers, but and then he just like at the end of all she said, he just like. Bullshit, and he turns away. Kid you not, he's in his trunks. He gets a phone. He puts on and he puts on some music. He had earphones in. Puts some music. Walks out and then turns around, turns off his music and starts talking. I'm like, what's going on? Is that really? Did someone edit this?
Okay, we need to see a footage of that.
Yeah,
that sounds so out there. That sounds
so
Devil May
bizarre.
Cry. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like Devil May Cry right there.
I don't know, man. I don't know. It's making me think this game is gonna be so. Is this game either gonna be so bad it's amazing and just legendary, or I don't know anymore, man.
I'm really hoping
game
for
looks
like
good.
Metal Gear Rising Revengeance level of ridiculousness. That's what
Oh,
I'm hoping for.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell
Oh,
yes,
man.
please. I would be down for that. But yeah, that just threw me off. I'll see if I can find that. It's in my history. But yeah,
One more thing to add about the villains, if we're going back to that topic. I just want to mention, or I just want to say, like, I've always been interested in a villain who levels up alongside the hero throughout the story.
Yes.
There's been, I mean, Boku no Hero Academia is like one example, but I don't think. Or I mean, it was all in the beginning, but I don't know. I don't find it as interesting, or it wasn't executed well. I really want to see, or I really want to do it myself. I want to write a story where it's like the villain and the hero are like leveling up alongside each other, plus the fact that they interact with each other a lot as well, like something like that.
I think the thing is it's tricky because it depends. I think if you're gonna do that, you might want to have another villain who's clearly above. Because usually, what makes a villain so memorable, great, is on paper you look at him and you look at the hero and like, how the flip are you gonna beat this guy? So usually they feel like they're just way more refined. They've leveled up way more earlier than you or something like that, and then it's usually on a typical story, it's the protagonist's goal to kind of like, get up, at least get on that level. It's not until like the last moment. They always feel like they're on the foot until like the last moment in the battle. That's usually what makes a good villain. A villain where they kind of equal the hero, I guess, I don't know, like it just, I think tension wise it won't be the same as a villain. I feel it'll be more like a very rude rival. I guess that's what I feel. So if you know that you're going for like a rival, you can make full advantage of that. But if you still want that villain like looming threat, you might want to have another character play that role, I suppose. But again, it depends. Like if that's all you wanted in the thing, then
I'll notate that down. Like I'll note it because I did want some like tips on this because I haven't fully written it out. But I do want. I've had like plans and thoughts about like I want to try to do something like with this character where it's like they level up or something like that. They like rise alongside the character. Maybe at some point they go a little bit further than what the character's current strength is, and that's where like maybe something like that. But in the beginning, I want it to be like they're rising alongside each other.
That is definitely a cool concept because it's like it makes it more dynamic, and also it helps. It's like it's kind of like is it kind of like Nora and Sasuke? I guess if you think about it, it's that's not too far off. If you want like an example, I forgot on my head.
Well, I mean, offhand thing as well. We could talk about this if we have the time, or otherwise we can save it for next time. But I've always had this idea or this plan that I wanted to make at the end of my story, like. Well, I don't think people care about spoilers. But at the end of my story, I thought about like making the main character and the antagonist or like the villain, they would end up together in a relationship. That was like my idea.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know. It's like I've always wanted to do that because I thought it's fun. Not really. It's fun. It's not really as fun, but like I've always thought like villain and hero kind of getting together as a relationship would be a nice idea and like fun to watch and everything like that at the end of it, and maybe even satisfying.
I can see it working. It's just I don't know. It's I guess when you say you want to maybe like kind of like leveling up together, it's the same character you're talking about in the end, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. It depends on the how antagonistic they are. I guess you can always. Like, do they need to be redeemable? I imagine they do need to if you want them to go together. I could imagine it, or I've been thinking about like it's more like they may like each other, but they have different kind of like they're on different ideologies and stuff. They're different sides.
They're on different sides, or they're on different ideas.
Different ideas and a different philosophy. Like you want the same thing, but you just have different means of going about it. If you want a good example of this, you can look at Ramza and Delita from Final Fantasy Tactics. Like Ramza and Delita both have the goal of saving Ivalice and making it a better place, but the difference is Ramza does this without the pursuit of power. He chooses to work with the people of Ivalice to fight back against a corrupt system, challenge the church directly. The leader, on the other hand, chooses to go behind the scenes, within the shadows. He goes for the pursuit of power. He kills people. He makes alliances. He breaks them. He clears his competition out because he wants to rule Ivalice for himself, because he believes that he's the only one that can steer Ivalice away from the calamity that it's facing. Ramza, on the other hand, chooses to remain as just this guy who wants can for everyone else, because at the end of the day, Ramza is a coward. He doesn't want to wield power because he himself doesn't know what to do with that power. He had it once and it didn't do anything for him. So now he walks amongst his peers to make the world a better place. Funnily enough, at the end of Final Fantasy Tactics, or rather in the beginning, it tells you that Ramza is remembered as a heretic. As such, his story is never recorded in history. But you're playing through the game from the perspective of a historian who has uncovered the records of Ramza Bale's existence, to which we find out the true hero of Ivalice was not Delita the way he wanted to be. The true hero was truly Ramza. Delita will likely be remembered as a little more than a leech as a result of all the sacrifices that he had made. You would think that someone who had made the sacrifices Delita had made would make him prime hero material. Ramza, on the other hand, you could argue he made the ultimate sacrifice. The sacrifice of one, leaving behind your home and all the expectations that were put onto you, the ability for you to live in peace because everyone and their mother wants you dead because they believe you're a heretic. He basically sacrificed everything, even his own identity when you think about it, just to survive. What did Delita sacrifice? He sacrificed his friends, he sacrificed his allies. He even murdered the person he loved at the end of the game. And Delita ends the game with this question: what did you get out of all of this, Ramza? I got this. So technically, both of the characters wanted the same thing, but you could argue that one of their answers came out on top over the other. But if you do want to go about making your antagonist and your main character basically two sides of the same coin, I feel it's imperative to ensure that both of them have different ways of going about their goal.
Yeah, true.
Yep.
Yeah, actually, when I think about it now, like, like my two main the characters, they're not is. Actually, I can't say too much for spoilers, but especially in the beginning, they both want the same thing. They both basically care and like want to look after, protect each other. But one of them lost their family. They already lost their family, and the other has yet to lose their family. So when it comes to certain things and how to approach it, they never really see eye to eye. They kind of find ways to kind of not really get on each other's nerves with it, but it is a continuing conflict where it's like, this person's not going to flip and understand me that you shouldn't be here because you have a family to look after, to be with, blah blah blah, and the other one's like, I want to look after you, blah blah blah. So there is this, although they really like they're close and everything, there is this like underlying thing of they will never really see eye to eye with that kind of ideology, and it does permeate through the whole story when I think about it into like big ways. But it's not two things. Well, you can have like people like going after the same goal, but then how they go about it is really like night and day.
Yeah.
Okay. What's that? That was for villains, was it? That was for villains, right?
Yeah,
for that,
villains? Okay. Cool. I have the list here, but I'll be honest, nothing's caught my eye too hard. Actually, how long? I haven't even checked the time. How long have we been doing?
We've been an hour and a half
filming.
now.
Exactly, an hour and a half.
Okay. Yeah. We can leave it here and probably continue another time. I'm gonna post up recording now, and then I guess we can just talk until it peters out. But yeah, this was good.